A king sits on the oldest throne in the world, 3,000 years of empire behind him. The civilization that invented governance, that built roads while Europe was still living in forests, that conquered Babylon and made Rome nervous. In 1935, he sends a single letter to every government on earth. Stop calling us Persia. We are Iran now. And just like that, one of the oldest names in human history vanishes from the map. But here's what nobody tells you. The name didn't change because of culture. It changed because of oil, because of fear. Because one man looked at what was happening to his country and decided the only way to survive was to become something entirely different. This is the story of how one of the world's oldest civilizations reinvented itself, and why that decision still drives every crisis, every conflict, every headline coming out of the Middle East today. Let's start with the land. Because with this story, the land explains everything. Imagine a single territory that touches the Caspian Sea to the north, the Persian Gulf to the south, Mesopotamia to the west, and the road to China to the east. Every major trade route in the ancient world ran through this plateau. Every empire that wanted to connect east to west had to cross it or control it. Whoever held this land held the lever of the world. That's why the first Persian kings didn't just build armies, they built roads. A postal system faster than anything in Europe for 2 more millennia. A legal code that let conquered peoples keep their own laws, their own languages, their own gods. The Persians didn't rule by crushing. They ruled by becoming indispensable. And it worked for 200 years. Then a 22-year-old with nothing to lose showed up. Alexander of Macedon crossed into Asia with 40,000 men. Everyone who knew anything called it suicide. He was marching into the heart of the most powerful empire on earth. Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela. 3 battles. 5 years. The Persian Empire was gone. But here is the paradox that defines everything that comes after. Alexander didn't destroy Persian civilization. Persian civilization destroyed him. He put on Persian clothes. He married a Persian princess. He ordered his generals to do the same. He started worshiping Persian gods. His own men thought he had lost his mind. Some of them tried to kill his closest friends. They nearly mutinied. Alexander died at 32. His empire shattered into pieces. Persia absorbed him and kept going. This is the pattern. This is the thing you need to hold on to. Because it happens again, and again, and again. The Parthians come. Persia absorbs them. The Sassanids rise. Persian culture deepens. Poets, architects, scientists, administrators. The idea of Persia as the center of civilization doesn't just survive conquest, it feeds on it, until the moment that changes everything, permanently. The year is 637. A force no one saw coming has exploded out of the Arabian desert, driven by a new faith. Moving faster than any army the ancient world has tracked. Loose formations, strike, and retreat. Impossible to pin down. And motivated by something that cannot be bribed or reasoned away. The Sassanid Persian Empire has war elephants. Professional soldiers, centuries of military doctrine. They outnumber the Arabs significantly. They lose, not just the battle, the war, the empire, the dynasty. The last Persian king is murdered by his own people while running for his life. And now Persian civilization faces something it has never faced before. Not just a new ruler, a total replacement of the spiritual order. The oldest religion in the world, Zoroastrianism, starts to disappear. The population slowly converts. Persia becomes a Muslim civilization. Here's where it gets extraordinary. The Arab world doesn't swallow Persia. Persia swallows the Arab world. Persian administrators end up running the new Islamic caliphate. Persian scholars become the foundation of Islamic intellectual life. Persian architecture, Persian poetry, Persian court culture becomes the standard for what the entire Muslim world calls sophisticated. Baghdad, the capital of the Arab Empire, is designed by Persian architects and staffed by Persian officials. The conquerors become the culture again. This is why Persia was still Persia after 1,000 years of Arab rule, and why, when a new threat arrived in the 19th century, the response was the same deep reflex. But this time, the threat was different. The British and the Russians didn't want to become Persian. They didn't want Persian culture or Persian wisdom or Persian poetry. They wanted oil, and they had something Persia couldn't match: industrial technology, steam-powered armies, telegraphs that moved faster than any postal horse. By the late 1800s, Persia is a shell. The Qajar dynasty rules in name, but the British run the telegraph network. A British officered brigade is the most powerful military force in the country. And in 1901, a British businessman signs a contract giving Britain exclusive rights to all Persian oil for 60 years, in exchange for a fraction of the profits. Persia has been stripped of its own country without a single battle. This is the wound. This is the thing that explains everything that follows. Every revolution, every coup, every crisis, every nuclear standoff. They all trace back to this moment. So in 1921, a military officer named Reza Khan stages a coup. He has British backing at first, because the British want stability and he can provide it. But Reza Khan has his own agenda, and it is much bigger than the British realize. He's watched what Ataturk did in Turkey. Modernize from the top down, build a real state fast enough that the foreign powers can't stop you. He moves quickly. He builds roads, railways, hospitals, universities. He modernizes the military. He industrializes at a pace that stuns European observers. In 1925, he makes himself Shah. The Pahlavi dynasty begins, and in 1935, he sends that letter. Stop calling us Persia. We are Iran now. Why? Why change a name the entire world has used for 2,000 years? Because Persia was the name the Greeks gave this land. A foreign name, a colonial name. Iran is what the people themselves have called this plateau since before recorded history. It means land of the Aryans in the oldest Iranian languages. Reza Shah is cutting the rope to the old, weak, colonized Persia. He's reaching past the Greeks, past the Arabs, past the British, all the way back to the deepest root of this civilization's identity. He's telling his own people and the world, we are not your subject. We are the original. It's a political maneuver dressed as a name change. And for a while it works. Then 1941 arrives. Germany invades the Soviet Union. The British and Soviets need Iranian railways to move war supplies. Reza Shah has been playing both sides, trying to use the rivalry to buy independence. The British and Soviets have run out of patience. Allied troops invade Iran. Reza Shah is forced off his throne. His 22-year-old son is placed in power instead. The foreign powers are back. The oil is still leaving. The wound never closed. Mohammad Reza Shah tries a different way out. He aligns with America, takes American money, American advisors, uses oil revenue to modernize the military and the economy. The 1960s bring land reform, industrialization, women's suffrage. Tehran starts to look like Paris. But two things are happening underneath the surface. The oil money isn't reaching ordinary Iranians. The gap between the westernized elite in the capital and everyone else keeps growing. The Shah's secret police silence anyone who asks the wrong questions. And in the mosques, something is building. An elderly cleric in exile has been watching all of this for decades. His name is Ruhollah Khomeini. His diagnosis is simple and devastating. Iran's problem isn't that it needs more Western technology. Iran's problem is that it sold its soul for Western approval. He offers a different answer, not back to the weakness of the Qajar era, back to Islamic identity. But on Iran's terms, an Islamic republic, sovereignty through religion, not through oil deals and foreign alliances. In 1979, it takes him 3 weeks to bring down a monarchy that had ruled for 2,500 years. 3 weeks. The Shah flees. Khomeini lands at Tehran airport to a crowd of millions. Iran becomes something the world has no category for. Not a monarchy, not a Soviet satellite, not a Western democracy, something new. And immediately, Washington, Moscow, and every government in the region has to figure out what to do about it. They still haven't figured it out. Now look at the whole picture. Look at what just happened across 4,000 years. Every time a foreign power reached in and took something, Iran folded inward and rebuilt from the deepest layer of its own identity. Alexander came. Iran absorbed him. The Arabs came. Iran absorbed them. The British came and took the oil. Iran exploded from the inside. The same reflex. Every single time. And the geography never changed. The plateau still sits at the center of every critical route between East and West. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, roughly 20% of all the world's traded oil passes through it every single day. One country controls that strait. This is why the nuclear talks matter. This is why the sanctions matter. This is why every American president since 1979 has had an Iran problem. Because the country sitting at the center of the world's most important resource corridor has been angry about what happened to its oil for over 100 years. And it has a 4,000-year track record of not forgetting. The name changed in 1935. The religion changed in 637. Governments have risen and fallen. Dynasties have come and gone. Foreign powers have invaded, extracted, retreated. But under all of it, the same question has been asked by every ruler, every conqueror, every revolutionary who ever stood on this plateau and looked out at the horizon. Who controls the center of the world? Iran's answer has always been the same. We do. And they are still fighting to prove it.